the I in CIO at FICO needs to stand for innovation, right? Because as much as you think about talking about the innovation that FICO has been able to build into our products and our platform, which kind of keeps us in that market leading spot, the growth that has led to, the only way that we can kind of keep up or be ahead of being able to accommodate is by innovating what we do internally.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Mike Trkay. Mike has, for nearly 6 years, been the Chief Information Officer of FICO, an analytics software company that earns a little shy of $2 billion in annual revenue. Mike is not only responsible for IT, but his responsibilities extend to the operations and support of FICO's customer-facing software as a service and platform as a service AI software. I look forward to hearing more about his role and the way in which his team helps drive innovation and revenue for the company. Mike has been with the company for 12 years, and since his arrival, FICO's stock has increased 3,600%. I look forward to hearing also more about how he has helped the organization stay ahead of that growth along the way. Mike, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Peter, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's begin, if you don't mind, with FICO. I mentioned only in the broadest brushstrokes the business you're in. Take it from there, if you would, and share a bit more about FICO's business.
Yeah, FICO is over 60 years old as a company. We have two really primary business units and strategic business units. We have the FICO Scores business, which is probably what most people know us for. It's really a product that kind of is looking at the credit risk associated to individuals, U.S., other regions. We have similar sort of FICO Scores. And then the other piece of our business is actually a software. It's an analytics software business. We play in a lot of spaces. If anybody's ever received those phone calls that say, "Hey, Peter, we see some weird credit card transactions. Can you verify if this is you?" That's probably FICO software in the background that's doing that. Our software is used to look at extra security by the TSA. If you've ever been flagged for extra security, large logistic companies use our software to optimize what goes on what trucks and what warehouses, where is it stored. So really, if you think about kind of data modeling, data analytics embedded within software, we really kind of have a number of products in our portfolio there. That's kind of been our go-to business for decades now within kind of that machine learning, AI, data modeling sort of software business.
Yeah, I appreciate that overview, Mike. And talk a bit about your role as Chief Information Officer. If anything, it's a bit of a not necessarily a misnomer, but incomplete given how broad your purview is. Talk a bit about your expansive role, if you would.
The role of CIO at FICO, and even preceding my kind of filling of the seat, has always been a little bit broader than I think what most people think of when they talk about like a CIO role. It does have that corporate IT element of it, the back office systems, whether that's finance, legal, HR, operating those, making sure that we can run our business with the systems and the information and the data that we need. It really is a part of the scope, but it's probably only about 10-15% of my mind share and in kind of my time. The bulk of it really is focused on the operations, as you mentioned, the technical operations of our software as a service and platform as a service offerings and that we take to market. So we have a B2B sort of approach. And so it's very customer focused. I think it kind of grew out of the fact that we moved from an on-premise software company to a cloud-based and then a platform-based company. And when we were on-premise, a lot of that technical operation, the CIO role here was pretty much what you would think of as a normal CIO role. But when we moved to cloud, that IT organization now all of a sudden was asked to kind of build out and operate infrastructure and applications for our customers. And so the role just kind of evolved and took on this additional scope to become much more customer facing and like direct customer facing than what's probably typical for most CIOs today.
Let's talk a little bit further about that, Mike. I do find that to be a really fascinating aspect of what you do. And when I think of CIOs who are customer facing, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes it's at companies that sell to CIOs. So think like enterprise technology organizations in Northern California, where the persona that the company is selling to is in fact the CIO, him or herself. And so the company's CIO becomes an advocate as a peer to those organizations. And it's not to say, of course, that yours isn't a company that ever deals with CIOs, but certainly not exclusively. And in fact, I believe you told me like risk officers, for instance, are oftentimes on the other end of those conversations. Talk further, even beyond kind of the technology aspect of this, which certainly makes some sense as to the logic of having this be much more customer centric.
Yeah, so it is a lot of my customer interaction on both the go-to-market side as well as in the day-to-day sort of operations kind of post-sale is not actually talking to the technical resources or the technical leaders of our customer. It's actually talking directly to the business leaders or the business analysts at the customer base. I think again, this kind of evolved from the fact we moved from this on-premise to then cloud-based approach to with our software. And a lot of times when our customers were moving from on-prem to cloud, they were doing it in a way kind of because they weren't getting from their own IT organization what they needed to do to run the business. And so when they started interacting directly with FICO to kind of say, hey, we'd like to move to the cloud. We love your software, your feature functionality that you have, but we want you guys basically operating it for us as well. There was a little bit of them wanting the confidence in our ability to operate what we're doing, that they weren't getting more of the same, right, that they got from their IT organization. And so it started, I think, a bit with hey, we'd like to meet the people who are responsible for operating this so we understand who they are, how they work, what their processes are. Are they going to keep us current? How do they respond to stuff in a timely and effective manner? And that was the foot in the door. Since then, I think our operations has actually grown into one of our sales strengths, right? And again, we talk about software as a service and platform as a service. And a lot of times sales cycles tend to focus a lot on what is the feature functionality of the software or the feature functionality of the platform. And we have market leading stuff in that space, don't get me wrong. But the as a service portion of it is just as critical to our customers. And so when you can demonstrate that you are world-class in how you operate and how you respond and what the customers are getting in the as a service portion of it, that actually becomes a market differentiator, right, for you. And it actually becomes valuable in the go-to-market sort of approach, which has resulted in kind of more and more customer interaction, right? Where we're advising them now, right, on how the as a service portion in our software can really help drive and change their business or help them digitally transform their business. And almost as like we're a technical partner of them that would be within their own organization.
And how do you think about the relationship with, like, for example, your sales team or your professional services team, clearly two other organizations that have profound touch points with the same cohort? Talk a bit about how you think about the touch points, handoffs, relationships within your organizations as it's reflected then to your customers.
While we are part of go-to-market, the largest part of our customer interaction, and so the three groups you talked about, our sales organization, our professional services, and then my team, the operations side, I always say that we're the three most customer-facing parts of the FICO organization. So all three of us have this very external customer perspective and view to what we're doing. And the bulk of while we are part of go-to-market, the bulk of our interaction with our customers is still on the operations side, that day-to-day sort of stuff. Hey, there was an incident. Hey, I need support or help with something that's going on. We're talking to them regularly about the realities in the operations and the performance of what their software and their environments. My inside joke is that the sales organization, they're the ones that our customers get to date. They take them out to dinner, they woo them, right? Professional services is who you get engaged to because you're kind of feeling it out and learning what it's like to live together. Operations is who you end up married to for decades, right? And because we're the ones who are getting up with you every morning, are dealing with the ups and downs of life for years on end. And so we all play a role in that. And there's an evolution, and you need all of those sort of points of interaction with the customer. But it's a pretty critical function. We think of ourselves as being core to revenue retention, right? It's one of the KPIs that we use to talk about the success of our operations organization. Are we meeting the expectations, right, of our customers, or are we creating risk for divorce, if you would, right? And how we manage the relationship. So
to continue with the logical conclusion of the analogy you're talking about. That's great, Mike. I appreciate that overview. I'd love to understand how your team, the team underneath you, that is your specific team, reflects the responsibilities that you have. You mentioned 10 to 15% of your time is spent on traditional IT CIO responsibilities. We've talked now a bit more about the expansive nature of your responsibilities as well. How does that then translate into the people who work on your team and the skill sets that they have?
A pretty straightforward structure, I think. So we have our corporate IT function. So gentleman, Matt Dixon on my team, he would be what you'd call the CIO, right? I think in most places, he does a fabulous job of really running the FICO business, the doing the systems and the IT things, associated with running our business. And that's a chunk of the organization, but they're a bit on their island because they're internally focused. They're the one kind of really internally focused part of our of my team. Then I have customer support as well. So this is when the customer is picking up the phone, they're calling FICO. It's my team that's really picking up the phone. They're the ones interacting with the customers, communicating with them, responding to them. And they're customer facing. So we look for a lot of similar sort of skill sets as what you'd expect within like a professional services organization, right? In terms of having that technical as well as the softer skills around communication and handling that. And then the other two chunks, and it's really kind of four chunks of my team, are technical in nature, engineers by trade, that are focused on infrastructure and then the tech stack and the provisioning, maintenance, and operations of that. And then I have people who basically are focused on our software. So we have people who are software engineers. We have people who are system administrators, or what would used to be called a middleware administrator. Now you probably call like more of an SRE or a DevOps type of engineer. And we don't actually do the coding to create the product, but once it's been GA'd, this is a group of technologists who are responsible for releasing that into the production environment, onboarding our customers, upgrading our customers, responding to these technical issues. So we kind of cover apps, infrastructure, customers, and then we have our corporate IT function as well.
Fascinating. Talk a bit about the ways in which you are leveraging AI. I know that you're really interested in AIOps and leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence technology to help with the technical running of the business, as you put it to me in a past conversation. Talk a bit about the application of that and its implications for FICO.
Yeah, we are an AI and an analytics company, right? And so we create all this software for our customers to leverage AI and machine learning to help them run their business. And so I think just the DNA of FICO has oriented to how do we do something similar in how we run our business on a daily basis. And so within the technical operations side, I'm a huge kind of advocate here of how do we take all this data, and whether you're calling it monitoring or observability or metering or any of that, the volume of that just continues to grow in a very hyperbolic sort of way here, year after year after year. And asking humans to kind of be able to parse that data and determine the signal through the noise is becoming a nearly impossible task. And so it really is the AIOps space that we're very focused on, is how do we apply some of this AI and machine learning technology to aid us in identifying the critical signals, within all of this data that we are now gathering and capturing, so that we can identify when there's a problem better than we've historically been able to do. How do we know what is good, looks good, and what looks bad in kind of all these use cases and applications that are unique that are out there? Then once we've identified it, how do we reduce that mean time to resolution so that we're restoring it more quickly if there is some sort of disruption? Then how do we use it to actually create RCAs, or a root cause analysis, to kind of say what was the problem at the root of it? There's triage, right, which is like just get it back up and running. And then there's root cause, which is like go fix the core of what's going on. And then how do we use it to actually either fix it or automate our responses so that it's even improving the mean time to resolution further? You're almost taking the human out of the loop, right, which tends to be where a lot of latency gets introduced. That whole cycle is really kind of the focus of AIOps. It's there's some fantastic stuff that's kind of coming out in that space. It historically has been what I would say is very rules based. So individuals writing rules about when you see this, do this, if this, then that, or now it's really shifting to model-based, right? Where it's you're not really having to create rules. Models have been trained to recognize the signals. Models have been trained to correlate a lot of those signals into a common root. Models have been trained to help you code the fix to what's going on in that environment. So awesome stuff, fascinating stuff. It's one of my true passions in the role, to be honest with you. I probably get more involved with that than I probably should in the role, but I think it's really a really great application of the kind of the leading technology in the AI and ML space.
Yeah, it's super interesting. That passion certainly comes through in the way you describe it, Mike. So thank you for doing so. And a few different times through this conversation, it strikes me the changes afoot within the company become represented in the way in which you service your customers, that there's an overlap between those. It almost feels like there's like a customer zero component to what you're doing. You are helping your company migrate and through the changes in the business landscape, operating model changes, the development of new platforms, et cetera, and then leveraging that experience, parlaying that into insights and products that can be sold on behalf of your clients. Is that a fair way to frame, if I'm pulling the thread correctly?
Yeah, no, I think so. We've gone on the journey, right, a little bit. And so that gives us some experience that when we are, as a customer-facing organization, when we go to talk to the customers, we're not talking about theory or potential. We're talking about having lived through it. And it used to be, we eat our own dog food. The better is we drink our own champagne, right? So we are we're drinking our champagne, and then we're conveying that experience to our customers. And the great thing is, I talked a little bit where it's been moved from on-prem to the cloud, but there's been an equally important transition or transformation, which is just going from cloud to platform. People, a lot of times, they'll use software as a service, SaaS, or platform as a service, and they almost sometimes use them interchangeably, right? But I actually think of them very distinct from one another. And so when you go to a SaaS offering, a lot of times the buyer there really is exclusively a business user, right? Because they're actually getting software that is purpose-built for a particular function, right? Transactional fraud, customer relationship management, loan originations, credit card originations, right? And so it's a business function that they're getting. And so when they moved from on-prem to the cloud and SaaS, a lot of times the IT part at the customer, they weren't really always part of the conversation. There was that direct sort of communication. As we've gone from cloud to platform, though, now platform's not tied to any one particular business use case. It's more extensible, right? And so the way that the different solutions they build on that platform, how they want to share data, manage, they're starting to loop their own technical people back into the conversation, right? And so that journey that we've been on, and kind of what made me think about talking about this is, we're now going back and not just talking to the business side, the CROs. We're starting to see the CTOs, right, who are the partners of those CROs at our customers, brought back into the conversation, right? The platform is bringing business and technology back together because it's this multiple use case. It's this platform-based piece, and the integration, the interoperability, and understanding how that works becomes a technical question that the customer's technical people want to understand a little bit better than they have historically. So I think that's also been an important part of the communication, and not just telling them about our journey, but being able to explain why they almost need to bring their tech people into some of these platform conversations as well.
Yeah, fascinating. I mentioned at the outset, Mike, that if I did my homework correctly, using Google Finance, that the month you joined, at least to now, the stock price has risen 3,600%. I'm sure there's complete causality between those two things: your arrival and that performance.
That's what I tell everybody, of course.
Of course. But the extent to which that is a reflection of the growth of the business, more generally speaking, that is such remarkable growth. I'm curious, across your tenure, how you've thought about managing ahead of that, ensuring the organization has the capabilities to absorb and digest that sort of growth so that it doesn't become a victim of its own success.
Yeah. the scaling, right, is really one of the biggest challenges in the role, and especially the first couple of years when I was, in the CIO seat. My inside comment to folks was, well, the I in CIO at FICO needs to stand for innovation, right? Because as much as you think about talking about the innovation that FICO has been able to build into our products and our platform, which kind of keeps us in that market leading spot, the growth that has led to, the only way that we can kind of keep up or be ahead of being able to accommodate is by innovating what we do internally, how we're supporting our developers so that they can get product churned out faster, how we're utilizing leading edge or bleeding edge sort of technologies in the cloud, or bringing those to bear ourselves to be able to provide all the availability, resiliency, security, those operational aspects that you need with ultra low latency at scale, right? Because we're in a lot of these cases, right? I'll talk to the example of the fraud detection, the credit card fraud detection. We have a huge part of that market. We sell to banks, and then the banks run our software in the background, right? But we have a huge part of that market. And so if you think about the number of credit card or debit card swipes that are happening per second on a global basis, and the fact that you're standing at the register, you're swiping your card, right? And they're sending that back, we're doing whatever else they're doing, but we're validating whether that's fraud or not. In a lot of cases, we're talking milliseconds, not seconds, milliseconds of time to get that done. How do you operate at scale of tens of thousands of TPS, transactions per second, at ultra low latency? That's an operational challenge that requires a lot of innovation and forward thinking, and that needs to be a cultural thing, right? So when the CIO being the Chief Innovation Officer, it was honestly not about trying to change the title. It was about trying to create a culture or an inspiration for the operators and the engineers in my organization to kind of say, hey, you're often thought of, as IT, right? The stuck in the mud, stodgy guys whose goal is to create process to slow down things to keep them stable. We have to flip that on its head. We actually have to think about how do we innovate to keep things stable, given the velocity, the speed, the scale that we need to operate at.
Yeah, well said. Very interesting. I appreciate you sharing those reflections. Given the innovation mandate and clearly an area of passion for you, I can only imagine you are attempting to look around corners from time to time, test various trends to see what sticks or what has application to a business like yours, or might accelerate a journey that has been articulated in a strategy of yours or the company's more generally speaking. What are some things that are starting to make their way onto your roadmap based on that investigation, Mike, that you would underscore?
Yeah, one of the areas I think is really just starting to emerge is, called like a focused language model. So within the AI space, we all have heard of the Chat GPTs and the Copilots and what have you. And those are these large language models, and they're great for kind of this general purpose, general knowledge sort of approach to handle things. But when you're an enterprise and you have very specific sort of use cases or a very specific industry or vertical that you're in, it's kind of like those are the high school graduates where there's a broad sort of application of what you want to go do. But you want to have somebody who, when you get to a specific function, who went to college and has a degree in that space, right? Has a specialization and a focus, right, on some of the language. And so the idea of smaller language models or focused language models that tend to be industry specific or use case specific, I really think you're going to, what we're starting to look at, and I think what you're going to see is an emergence and an adoption of those by businesses and by enterprises, because the general sort of LLMs, there's too much sort of drift and too much hallucination, and there's not enough sort of specific jargon in vocabulary that's relevant to how it's being used, that they can get confused. And so I think you're going to start seeing really a lot of emphasis on where should we be adopting a focused language model. I look at it from the idea of how do I apply to that AIOps space, right? There's a very specific language around network data and technology incidents, and how do I use a focused language model in that? Our customers look to people like FICO to say, hey, financial services, you've had this financial services data for decades. what are the focus language models that you guys can bring to bear in the financial services space, right? That make your software or just the way that we interact with AI more kind of applicable to the specific financial services use cases. So focus language models, I think, are something people should keep their eye on. I think it's pretty cutting edge, and I think it's pretty cool stuff. And you're going to see a lot more of that coming in, a lot more adoption of it.
Yeah, very interesting. I also wanted to ask before I let you go, anything you've recently read, watched, and or listened to that you'd recommend to peers of yours?
Yeah. So the AI-driven leader, it's Jeff Woods. So it's an interesting. You'd think maybe it's like this. How does AI work? It's not the technical nuts and bolts of AI. That's not what the book about. It's actually about how leaders can build AI fluency within an organization. How can they foster a culture of experimentation? This goes back a little bit to that chief innovation officer mindset. I think, is why I'm finding it, how do you foster that culture of experimentation? How do you align AI initiatives with business strategies? I'll give you a second thing I read that was really interesting. It was just a Wall Street Journal article. So it's not like a book like this is, but I was actually talking, I believe it was Procter & Gamble, and their kind of how they were looking at their adoption of some of these like analytics platforms or AI. And they had something like in the first year, there was like thousands of sort of use cases they did, and they've just taken 90% of that and pushed it aside, and are going to only focus on 10% of it. And the whole point behind it was this idea of aligning these initiatives with business strategy as opposed to kind of shotgun, go try to apply it everywhere. So it's a challenge though, right? Because I talk about, hey, culture of experimentation aligned with business strategy. As a leader, how do you kind of, let people be innovative and think, and yet kind of put some constraints to keep you focused on what you're. So great book. It talks a little bit about, as a leader, how do you balance those things? How do you bring some of that culture to your teams? So again, strongly recommend that as a read.
Great suggestion, Mike. We'll keep an eye open for that. And thank you, Mike, for more generally speaking, for a phenomenal conversation, sharing more about your remarkable, expansive purview, the rationale and the behind it, and the value derived from it, the methods you've used to ensure that yours is a team that's helping the organization stay on track, even through periods of great growth and great innovation. It's been a great conversation.
No, Peter, fantastic. Thank you for the time. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I hope to do it again soon.